Mr. Orlins, Professor Li, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for joining us, even when there's a typhoon number 8 today. We don't usually have a typhoon in November, as you all know. But this month, 4 typhoons in a row is very unusual. There's a Chinese saying, 贵人出门遭风雨, literally translate as, when important people travel, the storm follows. They speak a lot about our guest today. As unusual as today, Steve Orlins has an unconventional career himself. Starting off as a legal practitioner, Steve served in a US Department of State. He then worked in various law firms before switching to investment banking later on. Years later, he became the president of Lehman Brothers Asia, where he was based in Hong Kong for 8 or 9 years, I was told just a few minutes ago. It was no surprise that Steve probably knows Hong Kong more than some of us do. Being the top management didn't stop Steve from further broadening his portfolio. His footprint expanded to telecom sector, leading the Taiwan Broadband Communications group. In 2005, and since then, Steve has been the chairman of the National Committee of US-China Relations. Mr. Orlins is an adventurer, an expert, and also a contributor. His voice has been prominent in both public and private sectors. With insightful analysis and commentary, he advocates for constructive engagement and policy dialogue to foster a better understanding between the two important countries, China and the US. Professor Li Cheng, director of our Center on Contemporary China and the World, some of you know him well. He has been very active in Hong Kong, even though he has been only here probably a little over a year. And he was former director and senior fellow at the Brooklyn Institute of Institutions Zhang Thornton China Center before joining Hong Kong U last year. As an educator myself, who has stayed in mainland China, the US, and Hong Kong over decades, I fully recognize the impact of China-US relations in many aspects, especially the future of higher education and our younger generations. Many of them sit here today. So I look forward to hear more from Steve and Chen. Without further delay, may I invite Mr. Steve Orlins and Professor Li Chen to come to the stage to share with us their insight on the China-US relation, especially after US presidential election. Thank you, and enjoy.
Could you hear me in the back? It's okay? Yeah, very good. Well, thanks, President Zhang Xiang.
能听到吗？
可以。
我能听，他会用
Okay.
英文，我用中文。
Okay, good. Thank you so much, President Zhang Xiang, for your very thoughtful and enlightening remarks, and indeed, for your long-standing efforts to promote educational and scholarly exchanges across the Pacific. Well, especially your vision to make Hong Kong U as a bridge at this very difficult time and a bridge of international understanding. Our center, CCCW, is established in line with this vision, and today's event is also testimony to that endeavor. I'm very honored and humbled to conduct this fireside chat with a dear friend of mine for over 2 decades, Steve Orlins, who has been widely known as an exceptionally important bridge builder in US-China relations. The National Committee on US-China Relations for which Steve served as the president, has been tirelessly engaged in constructing a sound and productive bilateral relationship. Truly wonderful to have you, Steve, with us today. This fireside chat discussion will consist of 3 parts. In the first, I will pose a number of questions, or broader questions. The second part will consist of 10 yes or no questions. All questions requires only 1 word or 1 sentence explanation. And the third part involves audience questions. Now, the first...
Let me interrupt, though, if we're going to do
Please.
But I want to interrupt, first of all, to talk about Cheng. His coming to Hong Kong, let me tell you, is a big deal. This is really one of America's great China experts. Everybody always says to me, 你是中国问题专家. I said, not really. I'm a 专家. I know who to ask about stuff. And he can tell you when I'm going to see a Chinese leader, what do? I call Cheng and I say, give me his background. Tell me about that and how should I approach talking to him? So that's my first point. And I miss not having you in DC, because I'd go down and could see him. It's a little more difficult to reach Hong Kong. So that's point 1. Point 2 is I can't start this without, hearing President Zhang speak is, just reminds me of he in a lot of ways represents what the future should be. Now, what we'll talk about today is it may not be, but it should be that here is somebody who started his education in China, who did his graduate education in the United States, who made a real contribution to science in the United States at some of the finest universities in the United States, and now is back in Hong Kong making a contribution to education. And when I think about it, wow, that's just perfect. This should be a symbol for all of the young people over here and everyone else, because it's what the future should be. And then the last point is, so I was joking. I was only partly joking. We could do this in Chinese, but Cheng is a director, and I've got Xiang here, who is also director of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations. And they would say, it's okay to do it in English, but Xiang reminds me that now in China here, all of the things that you mentioned that I've done, and I think I've made a contribution. I'm actually best known for one thing. And if I was if people were following social media on the mainland, they would know what I was known for, which is, and it's relevant, it's very relevant today. It's, I gave a toast at Chinese National Day celebration at the embassy. Mm-hmm. And I quoted, partly because I started studying Chinese during the Cultural Revolution. So I know most of Chairman Mao's quotes, and one of them was, 在困难的时候要看到成绩，要看到光明，要提高我们的勇气。And that quote went viral in China. And now when I see the Chinese leadership, they all say, 你比我们有名啊，有4亿多人看。More than 400 million people have seen that. So that's the only Chinese you're going to hear from me today. So,
well,
or we can do more, but I'll turn it over to Cheng for his
thank
question.
you so much. And Steve, this makes me more humble because we have a wonderful audience here. There's a lot of big names and a lot of people, international famous. And so certainly make me even more humble. But you're very kind, they're overly generous. Anyway, I wish my mother were here.
Truthful.
And she would believe what he said about me.
I'm not known for my generosity. I'm known for being truthful.
Now, we have a lot of questions. The first question is, now the President Trump will have his second term. He will move to White House very soon. What's the best hope and what's the fear as they come to U.S.-China relations with the second term Trump administration?
The best hope. Wow. You know, I'm always an optimist, so I actually always move towards the thinking about the better things. I mean, the hopes, you know, so Trump negotiated a phase one agreement with China, you know, and trade advisor Lighthizer negotiated it, and we did a phase one, and it increased American agricultural exports to China. There was a little bit that was done, and there was hope that there'd be a phase two. So in the best case scenario, we actually have a phase two. And part of phase two is it's about China implementing 改革开放, implementing reform and opening, that a lot of the policies that America hoped for were not implemented. So my great hope is that the Trump administration says, all right, let's do these. And it would be stimulating consumption, being further open to foreign investment, doing a lot of things which would, if you stimulate consumer demand in China, it actually helps balance the trade deficit. So that is a real positive. I hope that, because President-elect Trump thinks more out of the box, that the two countries, what's happening in my experience from back when I was in the private sector, is you've had definitions of national security get broader and broader and broader to where things where you look at and you say, cancer research is national security? Really? This data is national security? And it's terrible for both sides. So what I hope is President-elect Trump and the people around him agree on a definition of national security, which would allow for more Chinese investment in the United States, more American investment in China, which would limit more the restrictions on exports. There still would be restrictions on export, but it would be a much more well-defined definition where we would narrow this definition. I guess we don't have folks from the consulate here, but I hope that we can reopen the Chinese consulate in Houston and the American consulate in Chengdu. I hope, you know, in the ideal world, you know, I lived in a China. You know, I've lived the majority of my adult life in China. When I first, you know, 20 years ago, you could read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post in China on the internet. Well, guess what? It got blocked. Facebook, YouTube, Google, Twitter can't be accessed in China. In my ideal scenario, the Chinese government says, wait a minute, we can do these things. This isn't a threat to our national security. So those begin to reopen. I hope our governments, the Chinese and American governments, are negotiating for increased visas for journalists. God, you know, if Steve Orlins was running these, it would be a no-brainer. We would have many more American journalists in China and many more Chinese journalists in the United States, and that would happen. And, you know, I talk about the restrictions on data. So we would jointly be finding a cure for cancer. I don't care where the drug is developed, if it's developed in the United States or China. You know, I have a sister who has cancer. I just want her to get better. It doesn't matter where any of that is done.
What's the fear?
The fear. By the way, my last thing was my last two things were we have more American students going to China and coming to Hong Kong. You know, this dropping off of young people, as you said in your FT interview, this dropping off of American students coming to China to study is terrible. You know, I think in an interview that CCTV did of me, they had a little script at the bottom, and it said, 下一个 Orlins 在哪儿? Where's the next Orlins? And if the kids don't go to study, they're not going to have them. I think, you know, the worst is, you know, we don't have a phase two. trade agreement. We see tariffs at 60%, which is going to be a huge dislocation in China. In the United States, it's going to be inflationary in China. The Chinese economy already is experiencing difficulty. I think it's fair to say that that difficulty will become even more acute. China will retaliate, so we'll see a much greater decoupling. We won't see a definition of national security, so everything, what's happening now is everything is being securitized. We didn't have to wait for President-elect Trump to take office. This is happening during the Biden administration. We'll see, rather than seeing students increase, we'll see more visa restrictions. We'll see it more difficult for Chinese students to go to the United States. The next President Zhang won't be able to go to the United States. He'll be denied, or she'll be denied a visa, and that would be terrible. We'll see further dropping of Chinese investment in the United States and American investment into China. We'll see, obviously with the tariffs, we'll see much less trade, and we'll be going down a road of decoupling, and that's sad. In my worst case scenario, we see flare-ups in the South China Sea. We see increasing. We see so the Biden administration did a good job at restarting discussions between the PLA and the U.S. military, and those stop. So we're not communicating, and the chances for an unintended incident increase. We have increasing tensions. We have the development of two ecosystems. So if you think about that, all of the duplication of research, if we have to innovate separately in China and in the United States, it's terrible, because you're going to duplicate the spending of all this money. You're not going to develop as fast, and it's going to have real consequences for the American people and the Chinese people. And I hope that the Trump administration recognizes that the people, especially lower income Americans and lower income Chinese, pay a price for this decoupling. I'm not sure.
Well, I want to follow up with the worst scenario, since you talk about the education exchanges. Actually, I had a lunch with the Consul General along with the U.S. delegation today, just a few hours ago. By the way, he sent his best to you. Biden administration is very clear. They want to continue educational engagement, even it's a part of our American strategy. Culture, educational exchanges, students exchange will continue. But for Trump administration, it's unclear. We do remember that in the fall of 2018, the White House reported, first by Financial Times, also by some other media. I think that the White House actually never denied that the political team and White House discussed about the possibility ending student visa for Chinese. Actually, it's unanimously agreed. Eventually, President Donald Trump vetoed it. Now, if we did not veto it, in the past 6 years, there's no Chinese students could go to U.S. Now, but also Trump said at least once, he said all Chinese students are spies. They are weapons by the Chinese Communist Party. Now, we also see the last year of the Trump administration, they see China's threat, they saw China's threat as a societal threat. So therefore, there's an initiative to ban the Chinese Communist Party members and their direct relatives to enter US. How many? At that time, 97 million Communist Party members, their direct family members, so altogether 300 million. Now the point is they cannot know that who are the Communist Party direct family members. So basically just want to completely decoupling to that level. Now, my question for you, do you think this initiative will be come back again and even implemented? How likely this could be? If that happened, this is a terrible thing for the bilateral relationship, will affect all other things. Your view?
Well, first of all, we're just at the very beginning of understanding what the President Trump is going to do. So we don't know the answer. But my sense is the tech sector, so Elon Musk, folks in Silicon Valley, and the financial services sector, go and visit those companies. So go to Silicon Valley and you visit those companies. What you see is thousands of Chinese students who are working there. The tech sector will tell him, if you do this, we will not be able to innovate at the rate at which we are innovating. So I would expect serious resistance from the tech sector at an over-regulation of Chinese students. So the most sensitive areas are obviously STEM, because they fear, the China hawks fear that these kids come to the United States, learn all this stuff, and go back and work for the PLA. Well, virtually none of them do it. Most of them go to work in Silicon Valley. And what President Trump is talking about is actually, it's interesting. So the visas will be more difficult, but staying in the United States after you've gotten your education is likely to be easier. He's kind of more of the camp, let's staple a green card to your PhD. So if you get a PhD, you're welcome to stay. Here, the United States has spent all this time and money through its universities educating you. Well, we want you to stay and contribute to American society. So I think, there is a recognition of the contribution that Chinese students make to American society. Having said that, if you are affiliated with universities that in China that are associated with the PLA, you're going to have a tough time getting a visa. That is really going to be tough. And the expectation, I think, you're probably not going to get a visa.
Well, sure, that when you look at the Silicon Valley, there's so many Chinese.
And look at the heads of all these companies.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're Chinese.
Yeah, let me move to a more positive side regarding President Donald Trump. In a Fox News interview, I think during the campaign trial, Donald Trump referred to President Xi Jinping as, I quote, smart, brilliant, everything perfect, end quote. And also during Trump's visit to Beijing in November 2017, we watched that on TV, that also read the newspaper. He referred to U.S.-China relation as forging, this is my quote, direct quote, a friendship that will only grow stronger and stronger over many years to come, end quote.
Whose quote was that?
President Donald Trump. Stronger and stronger.
We know he changes his
Sounds
mind
like
rather regularly.
I mean, which line we should believe? Now, my question is, do you think he will surprise us with a 180-degree turn to really make a relationship better, much better? As you said, he's out-of-box thinker, could be.
Yeah.
And he has some leverage capital to spend. Do you think this is, will make us more hopeful?
I would, two things. One, this is not going to happen in a vacuum. The Chinese government can do lots of stuff to kind of allow for President Trump and the folks around him to think, gosh, maybe we should think about doing a Richard Nixon. Maybe we should think about a 180, that this is not static. So, I talked already about Geiger, Kaifang. They can start really implementing some of the things. I mean, there is a document everybody said, oh, it's really complicated. Well, when I read, Cheng told me I had to read it. When I read the third plenum of the 18th Party Congress, I suggest you all go and read that, because it lays out a plan for reform and opening that is very impressive. The problem with it is it wasn't, 5% implemented, 95% non-implemented. Well, implement the remaining 95%. There are things that the Chinese government can do that would make the chances of a better policy higher. I recently, it's in the newspaper, it's not a great secret. So I'm the father of an adopted Chinese child. So it was during, the one-child policy, and a girl was born, and the mother was, 14 years old. So she gave the child up for adoption, and we adopted her. And so I feel very close. About 80,000 Americans have adopted Chinese children, and it's wonderful. And they become forces for constructive U.S.-China relations. These groups, they believe that, they've been given this gift, and they become believers in U.S.-China relations, that it provides a real benefit. So recently, the Chinese government announced that they have stopped this, which is fine. I understand, the one-child policy is gone. Chinese children can be taken care of by Chinese families. But in this process, there were 300 families who had already started the process of being able to adopt 300 handicapped Chinese children. So they already were able to FaceTime with them and develop a relationship. So these families knew these children. So you think about, so these are handicapped children who otherwise are likely not to be adopted. So I went to the Chinese government and I said, wow, adopt your regulation, but do it going forward. Allow the 300 families that have already identified their children to adopt the children. It will make the Chinese government look so much more human. And by the way, 150 congressmen signed a letter telling the Chinese to do the same thing that I requested. That may have hurt my request, not helped. But Chinese government didn't do it.
Well, we will go back to the people-to-people relations.
But Cheng, but my point really is that you need to give a new president a political foundation to do the right thing. And to the extent it's all about bad things, it's all about, this downward spiral, it's really hard. So we need to find things, like allow American journalists back into China. Well, that would be, we'll get a front page story in the New York Times saying, gosh, we now have 7 journalists in China instead of 1. So there are things. As for Trump being a Nixon, so obviously, Nixon was as anti-China as any American president. And all of a sudden, he sees the strategic imperative to have relations with China because of our competition with the Soviet Union. And he did it. I think Trump is enough of an out-of-the-box thinker that it's possible. I think it's highly unlikely, because I think the inertia is not in the right direction. The inertia is in the wrong direction. So I'll go up to Beijing on Sunday, but what I will say is, gosh, there are a lot of things that the Chinese government are good, and these things are good for the Chinese people. These are not bad for the Chinese people, these are good.
So, Steve, we talk about the spiral downturn or deterioration of U.S.-China relations over the past decade. Now, I have 2 analytical questions here. First, do you see the deterioration is largely driven by ideological difference or conflict of interest as the U.S. see China as a threat or feel insecure with China's ever-growing power? Now, you can say both. If it's both, I want to give you the percentage of each. You cannot equal them. This is my first question. Second question, you imply about Nixon went to Beijing, a conservative leader went to Beijing, talk about importance of presidency. Now, my question is, look at the past, decade or so, from Trump to President Biden, two different presidents, but you see the continuation of the toughness on China. And it may imply it's not so much related with the president or individual leader, but rather some of the structure problems in the relationship. And so that's the thing, it's beyond individual leaders. You know that in both presidency, some of their policy may be hijacked. For example, in December 2018, a very good meeting between Xi Jinping and President Trump in Argentina. The following day, there's a Meng Wanzhou story.
Yes.
There's also Biden wants to send Tony Blinken to China, but just a few days before or a few weeks before, there's a Broom incident.
Yeah.
So is that a structure problem or the general environment? Well, maybe we put too much emphasis on individualism, although individualism is always important. So your view, first, conflict interest or ideology. Second, do we put too much things on the president?
Well, I think I can answer your second one first, but the president's role is absolutely critical, and it's been critical since Nixon, that he kind of reset the policy, and with Mao and Zhou Enlai and Kissinger, and it was phenomenal, strategically so brilliant. So the question is, can we have a similar situation? I think from my view, it's conflicts. It's driven by an incredible series of decisions by both governments that have led to where we are now. And this didn't happen last year. It didn't happen in 2016. It started, almost 20 years ago. It was the relationship was so good. I remember, I'm a regular rider of the New York subways. Put up your hand if you've been on the New York subways. Oh, so a bunch of you. They're awful. Compared to Hong Kong, it's really terrible. So we have a signaling system that basically dates from before World War II. The Chinese have a great signaling system and have great rail cars and could really, so my dream had been both for the Chinese, for the China Rail to fix the subways and to fix the train between Boston and Washington. And I actually started having those discussions, and my view was, gosh, this would be so great. In the terms of the subways, it's mostly lower income Americans who were suffering. And my hope was that this could happen. And wouldn't it be wonderful that people would ride on better trains and they would say, wow, this is a result of constructive U.S.-China relations. I get to see my kids. My kids are on the other end of the railway. I can't see them because the train breaks down so regularly. In China, it would take me 45 minutes. In the United States, it takes 3 hours when it runs on time, which is pretty rarely. So it would be something which really could show that U.S.-China relations leads to a better life for everybody. So instead, my hope was in 2000, and I think Hu Jintao visited and we talked about it. I think it was 2006, 2007. Yeah. And we were so hopeful. I think you were at the dinner. We were so hopeful. But instead, what did we get? We got intellectual property theft. We had U.S. companies complaining bitterly about intellectual property theft. We had reclamation of islands in the South China Sea, which was deeply troubling to the people around President Obama. This wasn't yesterday. This was, and then, they had a good President Obama and President Xi had a good conversation in the Rose Garden at the White House, and it looked like we were on the path to fixing it, but we weren't.
Well, Steve, yeah.
But the deterioration then, as I mentioned, so then the tightening in China, not being able for young people. So we worry a lot about the young people. So, young people want their Facebook, they want their YouTube, they want their Twitter or X now, they want this, and they can't get it in China. And older people like me want the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, and we can't get it. And that tightening had an effect. It had an effect on the perception of who the Chinese government is. And then we got tariffs, and we got from the United States, and we got investment restrictions, and we got export restrictions, and we got all this. So instead of having a railway that would prove to the American people that good U.S.-China relations is a benefit, we've seen this downward spiral, and it's it's sad.
Yeah. Steve, I want to follow up. You referred to about the economic situation, because based on the exit polls, this election, the dominant issue shaped the American voters is economy, because working class, low middle class, they are dissatisfied with the economic situation in the United States. And look at the broader period, and as surveys in the US, including Janet Yellen recently said, for the past 30 years, working class, middle class, their life not improved much, as you said early on. Now, this is very difficult for Chinese to understand. They look at the superficial. Americans are doing wonderful. American economy is good. Stock market is good. US dollar is strong. And the investment, the private sector, all wonderful. Then, of course, that Donald Trump's victory show a different story, because working class, they think that they need to change. They're not that they think that Wall Street or corporate America benefit, but not the working class. This is what you refer to. Now, you know that I wrote a few books about the middle class. Of course, that the China's rise and born and the rise of the middle class happened at the same time American middle class is shrinking. Now, certainly there's a criticism in the United States, think that Chinese are eating our lunch. Of course, I have a reservation with that statement. I think it's more to do with a structural problem in the United States. But I do believe that's really the largest transfer of wealth happened in the past 20 or 30 years, that the Chinese middle class from never existed to very, very strong. Now, this is a related question. When China's middle class was born and developed, they benefited from American middle class, American consumers. This is the best allies. So the question is, do you think there's any way, as you refer to, Americans also see Chinese middle class could be beneficial for them, like reduce inflation, but more so, how Chinese government policy, like what they claim, inclusive growth, really have impact to American business group, consumers, working class, to change their views of China. No, I know this is very, very difficult, but this is related with some of the criticism, varied criticism from US side about the major change of on the economic landscape. You are the expert in this.
Well, that's why the Phase 2 agreement, or the third plenum of the 18th Party Congress, that will stimulate consumer demand. If you stimulate consumer demand in China, you're going to import more. You're going to import more. The trade deficit and Trump cares a lot about bilateral trade deficits. I mean, our friends at the Peterson Institute said you shouldn't care, but forget it. He does care. And if that happens, you will see a reduction in the trade deficit. The other thing that needs to happen, and again, I don't know how to do it, and I welcome anybody's advice, is we need kind of initiatives which show the American people that good U.S.-China relations benefits them.
Yeah.
You know, what we're seeing is because of the threat that the U.S. government perceives China is, we're seeing, what is our defense budget now? $850 billion? You know what I always say, when I'm on a broken down subway car and sitting there waiting for it to move, I say, gosh, couldn't we just take $5 billion and use it to fix our subways? But, you know, more seriously, to find ways to change the narrative to show that constructive U.S.-China relations is a real benefit.
Yeah.
But that's really tough to do. You know, people-to-people exchanges help.
Yeah.
So when people go to China, or when Chinese go to the United States, when Americans go to China and they go back to their home countries, they're more positive about the other country than before they visited. Even if they were, you know, Fanhua Pai, anti-China, they come back and they're less anti-China. So when I argue with the Chinese government, I said, let American journalists in. Let them in. And the response is, Mayo Yung, won't do any good.
Well,
I said it will, that even if they were anti-China, they'll be less anti-China, and maybe they will write a good story. I mean, the great example, so there were riots in Tibet. What year was that, 2008?
yeah.
Around the Olympics. And there was a economist journalist who was on vacation in Lhasa. And he was the only journalist who wrote accurately about the events. And I say to Joe, I said, this was good. And if you had journalists all over China, they would report the good things, except if there's one journalist, he only reports the bad things.
Sure.
The other thing I always say is, we have journalists here?
Of course, many. Financial Times.
So the Chinese have
Chinese
a habit
journalists.
when you go outside of Beijing and you do an interview, the Chinese will either invite the journalist or the interviewee to invite you to have tea.
Okay, good.
And everybody knows what that
Sure,
means. But
sure.
and I tell them, you know, really? Do you have to do that? I mean,
Yeah.
just don't do it.
Steve, echo what you said about, for example, China's really remarkable infrastructure development. It's certainly very much in line with Donald Trump's to make America great again. So he needs this infrastructure development to deliver to American people. So China certainly can help in that regard. Now, but
I think the national security hawks
Probably,
see my
yeah.
ideas and they go, are you serious?
okay, yeah. Now, a frequent question raised in China, I'm sure that we got a lot of questions from Chinese, is about 60% of tariff. People ask whether Donald Trump will really impose that tariff. Now, I thought that, of course, that for companies doing business with the United States or sell products to the United States, it's a crucial question. But for Chinese government, I don't think that's really a central question, because there's some other issues like completely decoupling, student exchanges. We'll talk about the security issues, South China Sea, Taiwan. These are far more important. Now, besides, China already prepared in terms of the economic strategy shift from us to ASEAN countries, to EU, or maybe Global South, to prepare this 60% tariff. But also that if really Donald Trump obsessed with tariff, this will make U.S. inflation even higher. So this cannot be sustainable. Now, my question for you is, do you think that the concern in this country, China or Hong Kong, about the 60%, you think it's really that important I mean, for a country, of course, I understand for companies. So your answer for that one, the trade issue, tariff.
Well, if it's your ox that's getting gored, you kind of care a lot. It depends, obviously, what company it is. You know, if you're in China and you're selling all, if you're an American company, you're in China and you're selling all your products in China, it's not going to have a huge effect. But I think the effect on the country will be significant. I think that the Chinese economy is already experiencing difficulty. It's trying to export its way in part out of it. It has some stimulus, but now that we're seeing attempts to have additional exports to other countries, I think that these tariffs disrupt that plan significantly and put the Chinese economy in greater difficulty. So I mean, we don't know, but my sense is we won't see 60% tariffs. We'll see higher tariffs, but I think it's unlikely it will go to 60. So we're going to see, you know, what President-elect is talking about is tariffs on all countries. So let's say he's saying 10 to 20%. So let's say it ends up at 10% or 5%, and then the China tariffs would be 30 or 40%. So still very significant, very disruptive. And if it's your goods, you know, what we're going to see in the next 2.5 months, or now 2 months, is an enormous uptick in Chinese exports, because everybody's trying to get the product into the United States before the tariffs kick in. So it's going to be this peculiar set of circumstances where, I mean, there are lots of stories about, you know, Chinese companies getting called. How much can you send between now and January 20th? It has to get in before January 20th.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that.
Yeah.
Already.
Let me shift to security issue. Donald Trump said, this is reported by John Bolton, his former national security advisor. He said, Donald Trump said, what's Taiwan? Taiwan is a pen, or even the point of pen. What's China? China is a desk in his own office. Now that certainly makes a lot of people very nervous, including Taiwanese and American allies. Now his foreign policy could be more isolationist, more domestic focus into the overall strategy, different from President Biden's coalition base, the foreign policy. Now, what do you think? Do you think Donald Trump will cut a deal with China regarding Taiwan? Particularly, he said that if China attacks Taiwan, I will increase the tariff to 200%. You can imagine Chinese public leaders are laughing about that. They certainly welcome that kind of exchanges. What do you think, as American?
The people who he is appointing around him, so Senator Rubio, Congressman Waltz, the others in the national security area, are people who have repeatedly expressed support for Taiwan. So what the president-elect, I think, will do is call for people, for areas where the United States extends a security umbrella to increase payment. So he's going to tell NATO they have to increase their defense budgets. He's going to tell Japan and South Korea, you need to not only increase your defense budget, you need to pay us more for our troops. He's already said to Taiwan, you know, you need to increase your defense spending, you need to buy more, and the Taiwan folks have already prepared I believe a $15 billion purchase of weapons from the United States. So they're already getting prepared. I think the chances of a major change, given the people he has surrounded himself, I think is likely not high. The question becomes, again, depends on what William Lai does. It depends on what the Chinese government does in cross-strait relations. So, but I don't expect the U.S. to initiate a major change.
Let me move to Hong Kong, the issue. And you know Hong Kong so well, and especially the people-to-people exchanges. Both you and I care the most. One of the most rewarding things since I moved to Hong Kong is we can continue to engage in education exchanges. I host a lot of American delegates, students, high school, middle school, and alumni of Schwarzman College. It's sponsored by your National Committee. And also that a few months ago, CCCW hosted the delegation about the PIP, Public Intellectual Program, your secondary program. So these things I certainly will continue to collaborate with you and for even civil society program, etc. Now, what's your advice for Hong Kong? Just a few days ago, Xia Baolong made a statement. We should welcome foreigners to come to Hong Kong because not so many foreigners come to Hong Kong. People fear for various reasons. Any suggestions to open up for Hong Kong? It's a unique position.
You know, the issue is the perception in the United States. So the perception in the United States is Hong Kong is part of the one country, and the two systems part has basically fallen apart. So if you go to a congressman and you tell him how judges are appointed in Hong Kong, you go, oh, really? I didn't know that. So they don't understand it. Part of it is Hong Kong needs to talk more about the two systems and really has to emphasize that. I mean, there is a risk, for instance, that you know, the Congress, the House has already passed a bill that calls for the elimination of the Hong Kong economic and trade offices, which exist independent of the mainland's diplomatic offices. So it exists, and it performs a great, people who run these offices are really good. They're really professional. I mean, they are top flight. But that has not stopped the Congress from saying, well, why, if it's all about one country, should they have separate representation in the United States? So how does Hong Kong counter that is talks more about the two systems, you know, constantly talks about the rule of law, the common law system, the convertibility of the Hong Kong dollar, all these things which you don't get in Shanghai or in Shenzhen. You just get it in Hong Kong. So constantly be emphasizing that with a hope that it can change the perception, because the perception now is you know, it's all about one country, and we've seen this bill passed, and the reason, you know, the Senate was controlled by the Democrats, and the Senate would not bring it to a vote, but you know, now the House is Republican and the Senate is Republican, so Majority Leader Thune may be willing to have it brought to the Senate for a vote, and if it is, it will not have a good result.
Well, Steve, your esteemed visit today marked the 30th activities we engaged, CCCW, since we established last December. We invited President Biden's former advisor, Frank Giannuzzi. We invited the current Prime Minister, British Prime Minister advisor, Peter Mandelson, and certainly we're so honored to have you today. Now, if you don't mind, I go to some quick questions that 快问快答.
Yeah.
We try to finish it.
We call it the lightning round.
Yes. Just,
but they really have to be yes, no questions.
Or one sentence explanation. First, do you think Donald Trump is a peace-loving leader?
Yes.
Has come to the.
Yes, he is. He really talks a
Okay,
lot.
He
talks a lot about. He did. You know, there were no wars during his presidency.
Oh, good. And who will be his ambassador to China?
No idea.
What kind of a professional or political background is most suitable for such a person?
Fluency in Chinese.
Okay, good. That's a good one.
You know, and I should say, you know, every Chinese ambassador for decades speaks fluent English. So when there haven't been any Xis, so when he goes to see the president, or he speaks in English. We haven't had a fluent Chinese speaker as ambassador to China for many years.
Enough.
And
More than
we need to have
we'll
it.
move on.
Well, I feel
We'll
strongly about that.
Yeah. Now, who will be the next Republican administration's Kurt Campbell, the chief person for handling China? You talk to him almost weekly. Who will be that person?
Don't know.
In addition to Elon Musk and you possibly, to be served as the messengers between President Trump and President Xi Jinping, who else could play that role? Quickly, name.
Steve Schwarzman, Ken Griffin.
Okay, very good.
And Elon Musk, of course, but you said him.
Yeah. President Xi and President Biden are set to meet. Both of them attended APEC and the G20.
On
right?
Saturday, yeah.
Yes. Now probably it's time to evaluate the achievements or problem of Biden administration has come to China. What's the score? What's grade you would give?
On
A
the
minus, B plus?
on the Biden
administration China policy, A minus, B plus, or D minus, or F. You choose one, just one.
I'm not an academic. I don't
Choose
give
one.
grades. I don't give grades.
Percentage.
Can't give a grade.
Okay. Now, are you for an early in-person meeting between President Trump and President Xi Jinping? As we know that he actually invited Xi Jinping to Florida within 3 months. This is the earliest meeting in the first term.
Yes.
So, okay. Now,
Early meetings are good.
Yeah, that's good. Early meetings good. Now, in terms of state visit, highly likely Trump will go to China rather than Xi Jinping come to America, right?
Why?
Political environment here. But anyway, my question is here. Now, if he goes to Beijing, he will bring some cabinet members, senior advisors. Some of them are the sanctioned list in China. How your suggestion to resolve that problem? One sentence.
Unsanction them.
Okay, good. Very good.
That's a half a sentence.
Now, the next question is the one I asked Kishore Mahbubani, just the same place 2 months ago.
He's much smarter than I am.
Oh, no, yeah, you're so modest. The question is, if there's a military conflict between China and the United States, or even war, where it most likely occur, Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, and in China-Indian border, or Korean Peninsula, or elsewhere? Your answer.
There won't be a military conflict between the United States and China.
Are you so sure?
Yes.
Okay. Despite the quick concession, America remains deeply divided. Probably it's a fair statement, right? Americans are deeply divided. Some argue that the three vicious tensions will continue to tear America apart. Namely, number one, economic disparity. Number two, racial tensions. Number three, cultural wars. Which one, in your view, is the most consequential or troubling among these three? Or something else?
You know, I've seen America more divided than it is today. You know, during the war in Vietnam, when my classmates were dying, we were incredibly divided. Every day we went and stood in front of the White House. We stood on Boston Common. We protested against the U.S. government. And we would have fights with those, fist fights and rock fights and fights with sticks.
So,
kind of
your answer.
It's nothing compared to what it was then.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, next question. Is there anything, issue or event that can really unite the United States. You know that the
the United States and China, or the United States?
United States domestically, because you look at the issues like Ukraine war, like Middle East conflict, like the serious domestic problem cannot unite the country reach consensus. So that the U.S. need unity and solidarity. What can unite the United States in your view?
A cataclysmic event.
Like
whether it's a natural disaster or a terrorist event or, something really bad where people will say we have to be united. And that's, think about how united the United States was after 9/11. That it really pulled together.
Excellent answer.
But could be a climate disaster. It could be a malfunction of something. It could be.
This may also change the foreign policy views about U.S.-China relations, right? Like someone said, if like the Mars invade the Earth, then people will have different views, right?
Well, there's everybody should watch the movie The Martian.
Yeah.
You know how they save how they save them on Mars? The Chinese have a secret space mission that goes up and brings him back.
Yeah.
So
you handle so well. Last question. Highly likely President Trump will improve relations with Russia, with Putin. Should Chinese be worried?
Highly, highly likely.
Unlikely.
Highly likely.
Likely. My question is.
I think we should take President-elect Trump at his word that he will have peace in Ukraine very soon after he is elected. He will cut off or greatly reduce U.S. weapons supplies to Ukraine, which will force them into a negotiation with Russia. So the question that gets to your question, so what does that mean for China? Well, it certainly will bring Russia and the it won't put us close together, but it will take the biggest irritant and likely end it. And then what we'll probably see is a reduction of sanctions against Russia. Then we'll, so for instance, when I flew here, you can't fly over Russia.
But,
so you'll be able to fly over
Steve,
Russia. You'll be able to do
good.
these various things.
Very good answer. But my question is, should China be worried?
I think it's good for China.
Good for China.
I think it's good for China. One of the greatest irritants in U.S.-China relations is China's support, the U.S. perception that China is supporting Russia in its war in Ukraine. That dual-use items that can be used for military or civilian use, are going from China to Russia. And the U.S. government believes that the reconstitution of Russia's industrial base has been as a result of the help of China. So this will reduce that irritant and should lead to a better U.S.-China relationship. What I hope is that we do have peace and that, that irritant leads to a better relationship with Russia and a better relationship with China.
Well, first, before opening the floor, let's give a round of applause to Steve. Really quite remarkable. We have about 25 minutes, and so please just raise one question and also introduce yourself. Not the lecture, but the question. And the lady over there. Over there, yeah.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kanika Rakra. I'm here at the Asia Global Institute as a fellow for 3 months. Been spending some time here in Hong Kong and also understanding a lot of how the engagement's happening. I was wondering if you could elucidate a little bit about how the Indo-Pacific strategy is going to change with Trump 2.0, because he in 2017 sort of brought so much into the conversation and brought Indo-Pacific back to the life. So just your comments on that. Thank you.
Excellent question.
I think we're going to see, so President Biden's approach was gather allies and have those allies carry part of the burden with the United States. I think President Trump is going to reduce our commitment to all of our allies, is going to reduce our commitment to NATO, is going to require the Japanese and the South Koreans and the Taiwan authorities to basically spend more on defense and carry the burden that way, not through an alliance, but just say, okay, you have to write a bigger check. And that is going to be a big change.
Well,
I mean, I have questions. I don't know the answer, but what happens to AUKUS?
yeah,
So, you know, it's a lot of money from the U.S. Treasury. And
I want to follow up a question with that. Trump's isolationist approach, I just wonder how long can last, because America has 700 military bases overseas. If for some reason that the things really hit the U.S. very, very badly, do you think, you also mentioned he's surrounded by very hawkish people, and these people are also sometimes, you know, will not take a liberal approach. So the isolationist, non-ideological policy may shift back. That's the, no?
I think this is a principle for him, for the president-elect, and if it requires the United States to bring some of the troops home, I think he's fine with that.
Okay.
I think he's fine. I think he has for him, it's about economics and trade, and not overextending the United States military all over the world.
Okay, Brian Wang.
Someone else? Hi, hello. I'm an assistant professor. I research philosophy and I like thinking about the world. It's just a very provocative question, and Stephen, it's great to see you here. To what extent do you think the question today omits a very important part, and that is the rest of the world? Because when we talk about reconstructing US-China relations, surely India matters, given that it's the most populous country and a member of both BRICS and, you know, also Quad at the same time. Indonesia matters, it's the fourth most populous country in the world and a leading pillar in ASEAN. The EU matters as well, given that it is the primary victim in many ways of the Russian war of aggression. So my question for you is, to what extent do you see these other actors as germane to this question concerning reconstructing Sino-American relations? And do you lament the fact that we haven't quite been able to discuss them with as much detail as you could have, perhaps, in the first hour of today's conversation? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's tough to answer because, you know, MAGA, Make America Great Again, is about taking into consideration what Cheng was talking about, the working class in America. Mm-hmm. And if it means the Indians or the EU or others need to sacrifice, too bad. I mean, this is about making America great again. The President-elect Trump believes what Cheng was talking about, that there's been a hollowing out of America. And it's not fair to the folks who work in industry. So, you know, he is, I think, is going to be pretty tough with all of the countries that you mentioned.
Student? Are you a student in the middle? Yeah, both. You both, please ask the question. Yeah. You go. Are you a student?
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Stephen. My name is Thomas. I'm studying the China Development Studies in HKU. And my question is, do you think how Donald Trump will deal with the relationship between America and the North Korea? Thank you.
Yeah, probably two more questions, and you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for this chance. I'm a freshman studying philosophy. My name is Ping'an, which has a good meaning. And my question is, from my point of view, macro interests such as national security, competition between the manufacturing and tech giants are being put emphasis on for the relationship between US and China, rather than micro welfare of individuals living in a society. Why the policymakers not paying attention to satisfying people's need from maybe the lower layers of the society, rather than focus on some macro, some vague or abstract concepts?
You talk about American leaders, or?
Actually, American leaders, and I don't think American leaders are focusing to solve the problem of unfair distribution for individuals.
Okay, last question in the back. Yeah, are you a student? Yeah.
Yes,
microphone.
Hello, I'm Aiden. I'm studying international business and marketing here. And my question for you is, since you've had such a long career starting out young with US-China relations, as someone who is also from the US, what type of skills do you think you've learned throughout your life that you think will be important to learn as someone who's interested in pursuing a career like that, both in the business field as well as maybe the State Department as well, I guess, or things that you think,
Sure.
new technologies in the future that
Very,
also would
very
be important?
clear.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Great.
3 questions.
North Korea. I think, and this is pure speculation, that President Trump will go and try and reestablish contact with Kim Jong-un, that he will look towards making some grand bargain with North Korea. It's in Americans' interest. It's actually in North Korea's interest. It's in China's interest. So, and I think he'll try. Whether he succeeds or not, I don't know. But he certainly is going to try. And he has this interesting ability to be able to talk to authoritarian leaders. So it's he just can, for whatever in his DNA, he can talk to Putin, he can talk to others, he can talk to Kim Jong-un, and so he will reach for that. Second question, it's one of the problems. It gets back to my subway question. I sit on the subway, and my subway stop is the first stop in Manhattan. So I'm on the subway, and the truth is so it's the first stop. I'm the only Caucasian I'm the only rich person also on the subway. And I sit there and I go, gosh, what is our government doing? These people are commuting, 2.5 hours back and forth to work because the subway stinks. And nobody is taking into account that they can't spend time with their children because of this lousy infrastructure. And it's what our government has been doing for a long. The subway didn't break down overnight. It was designed by geniuses. The people, the scientists, the folks, the urban planners who designed this were geniuses, and they really made it work for everybody. But then nobody fixed it. Nobody reinvested in the infrastructure because they didn't, to your point, they didn't really care enough about the lower income people. So and tariffs. Who pays, Walmart tells me it's the old tariffs, not the new ones. It was $1,200 an American family paying for those tariffs. So every family third of American families shop at Walmart. So they tell me it's $1,200. If you're rich, you don't even notice $1,200. If you're not, you got to decide, do I not buy my kids new shoes, new socks, new pants, new underwear, books for school, whatever. It's so unfair. But the government doesn't quite see it that way. And I resent it deeply, but that's
Last
one
question.
person. Career. Get fluent in Chinese. Live. I was better to be lucky than smart. So one of the great secrets in my life, which isn't much of a secret, because I'm going to tell you, when I applied to Harvard Law School from Harvard College, I didn't get in. And I was such an arrogant little kid that I had no plan B. So I was graduating, and I didn't have a plan B. So the admissions director said, sorry, you didn't get in. And I went, what?
Yeah.
Why not? They said, well, because your grades as a freshman and sophomore stunk. So I said, oh, God. So then I went to Taiwan, and I lived with the Chinese family and became totally fluent, so fluent that if you ever want to go to sleep at night, you can read my translation of a book called Guoji Sifa, Private International Law, into English, which is the most boring book you'll ever want to read.
Yeah.
So if you need to go to sleep, do it. But so become fluent and then get some other skill. So in my case, my skill was I got a law degree.
Yeah.
So I was fluent in Chinese and had a law degree. So you combine two, and then you have a great career. You know, you can do anything. And then you do what you love.
Yeah.
Just always choose what you love.
Well, Steve, there are 300 million people in China in school, you know, elementary school, middle school, high school, and university, graduate school, 300 million. Probably 200 million people are learning English. But in US university, only 27,000 students register Chinese. Do you think there's a problem for, as a country, as a great power?
Absolutely.
And also very few could afford or is willing to study or spend time in China. Do you think that reflects a serious problem?
Serious
That's
problem,
great.
terrible problem.
Yeah.
In other words, we have a two-way problem. One is we're seeing a decline of Chinese students going to the United States, which, you know, again, is bad. You know, we really want more, I want more Chinese students. And then the decline of US students in China has been precipitous. You know, 12 years ago it was 19,000 and now it's less than 1,000. That's really terrible. And we need to generate more interest. And that's the responsibility of your former colleagues, people who are teaching at American universities. You know, we at the committee have a public intellectuals program where we have now 140 young academics who are experts on China at universities throughout the United States, and they try and get Americans to come back to China.
Good. We have some journalists here, and will journalists have a question at Wang Feng? Yes.
Hi, Mr. Orlins. Thank you. My name is Wang Feng. I'm the editor of FT Chinese, the Chinese edition of the Financial Times.
Oh,
you talked about the dismal future for Chinese, aspiring Chinese students going to the U.S. But this university...
dismal?
Dismal future for Chinese, aspiring Chinese students.
I didn't say that.
Right.
That's not what if I said that's not what I meant.
Yes, the potential for that. But this university is actually one of the biggest beneficiaries, at least in the last 10 years of this exodus, of this reverse brain drain of ethnic Chinese talent coming back to China and Hong Kong as a result, partly, of the China Initiative. So what do you think the second Trump term is going to do to education exchanges and talent flow between China and the US? Thank you.
You know, I think it may become more difficult for Chinese who get educated in China to then go to the United States for graduate work. But those who go will then have an easier time getting H-1Bs and green cards, because there seems to be a philosophy within Trump and his orbit that if we educate you, then you really should stay. You know, again, it gets to the idea of stapling a green card to your PhD. So, which makes sense. But as I said, if you're at a PLA affiliated university, you're going to have a tough time getting a visa. But I don't think the future for Chinese students in the United States is dismal. I mean, we'll see if the China Initiative gets recreated, which will be a bad sign, but I don't know if that will happen.
Steve, our mutual friend, David Ho, the medical doctor and the scientist, he said, I quote, FBI did more for China than China's organization department, CCP organization department, in terms of recruiting talents. You know, under the president Zhang Xiang, you know, you recruit so many talents from, you know, and let's give a round of applause in this situation. But on the other hand, it's really a terrible situation for the U.S. I hope that some people, real strategic thinkers, should think about what all this means. Let's get more.
But there are constituents in the United States who want to keep it open, so, and these constituents are close to Trump. So the tech sector needs Chinese STEM graduates. They need it. Then if they get cut off, that's going to affect their ability to innovate. So it's going to be a push and pull. I don't think we know the answer.
But the point is that the just the recent 3 years, I think the collaboration between American scientists and the Chinese science, their publication in Science, Nature, declined dramatically. Not the same case with European scientists with Chinese scientists. So that's a serious problem, right? In terms of this collaboration, and the American scientists are so worried to come to China because the regulation is so tough, even not a ban, right? So that's again at the more journalists. Are you journalists? Please, yeah.
Hello, this is Vicky from HK01, Xiang 01. I'm a yes.
Hong Kong
HK01.
is the largest
Yes,
Chinese.
I'm the assignment editor of the international desk. So my first question actually is, you can see that today, Trump actually made an announcement that Marco Rubio is going to be the Secretary of
State
of the state, and also you can see that he deemed a Fox anchor to be the Secretary of Defense, and also we can see that Robert Lighthizer is going to be probably the trade.
What's your question?
Yes, my question is, we can see that he is choosing many mega camp officials. So what would be the difference between the Trump's first term and the second term? I mean, in terms of the Chinese concern, because we can see that Marco Rubio is very aggressive towards China. Yeah, thank you.
He knows the system better. I mean, he knows that, and he's going to make appointments of people who are
loyalists,
who are loyal to him, and that's what you can see in all of these choices. These are people who are extremely loyal to him. So he believes that when he gives an instruction, these people who he's appointed are going to carry it out. In his first term, he believed that was not the case, that they were more institutionalists, and he would give an order and they would not be implemented, and that he felt was not good. So he understands the system. And he's going to, these are appointments that are not in the mainstream. Some are very surprising. The Attorney General appointment is very surprising. The Secretary of Defense is very surprising. These are non-traditional appointments, but he won the Electoral College. He won the popular vote. He believes he has a mandate, and he is exercising his power.
Edward.
Edward Yao. Well, on behalf of the gentleman sitting next to me, Clement, and myself, thank you for your remarks, positive remarks on what we've done.
Could you introduce yourself?
Because we were both once the commissioner,
commissioner.
Of the ETO in Washington, and myself, the director. Yeah, thank you for that, Bill. Well, your remarks or your reflection on the subway remind me of an author that I admire most, Thomas Friedman, because in one of his books he mentioned about in tackling climate change, if U.S. can borrow one day from the Chinese administration, then some of the climate change problem in the U.S. could be resolved. Now that was a very positive remark. But until the time when I saw him sort of standing next to President Trump in his first term, supporting the U.S. policy against China, I noticed that, well, there might have been a very marked change of heart, even on, like Thomas Friedman, who is a strong advocate for globalization. My question is there still room in U.S., particularly in D.C., really to have conversation like this, where people can have a more fair-minded, open global view, or are we still in the very deep division that Professor Lee mentioned, that there is no room for anything but politics? I raise this partly also because I've seen the congressional sentiment really moving to a single direction. more so than the administration or other parts. And I've been seeing also the business sector has been quite tight-lipped on certain area when it comes to a choice between US and China, and not let alone the limited space for academia, whatnot. So we're of course happy to see Hong Kong being the place for such forum, but are there still room in the US, particularly in the capital city, within the Beltway, for such discussion? Sorry about a long question.
So it's more a question for Cheng, though. Can your colleagues at Brookings hold discussions? Now, I think they, I mean, it's
tough.
It's tough.
The environment. Yeah.
You know,
It will take a while. Yeah.
You know, we at the committee continue to focus on experts. So the criteria, we don't have a criteria in terms of your view of US-China relations. We have a criteria based upon your expertise in the subject matter. So you better be well educated, you better have had some real practical experience and have dealt with China up close and personal. And if you have, then you can be on our platform. Our platform now gets, you know, millions of views. It's, you know, once upon a time it was hundreds, then it was thousands, then tens of thousands. Now it's millions. So, and expertise still does matter. Does it matter enough? Probably. Well, I don't want to say not, but well, you know, it's Cheng knows better because he's in D.C. You know, he was in D.C. Whereas, you know, we're in New York, and to some degree, it's a different ecosystem.
Well, I apologize. We come to the end of the program. 1 hour and a half moved so fast, and I don't know. What do you think? I learned a great deal from your insights, your knowledge, your balanced views, and your hope and fear. And I hope that you will come to Hong Kong again. This is a place you spend a lot of time. And for the end, I also wanted to, if possible, ask President Zhang to come back to stage. We have a small souvenir. It's a symbol to hope that we will play a bridge both sides. Would you please come back? Do you want to say a few words? No. Okay, no few words. Yeah, so we'll take a photo. This is a souvenir. It's the lines. It's a symbol of Hong Kong U. It's the bridge. It's the, okay, good. Yeah. Maybe we'll take a photo.